Guys, did you know there's 3 types of materials that you can make a wood stove with? There's probably more than that, but essentially we have 3 major components that stoves are made out of. One's not sitting right here. So option number 1 is we can have a steel plated stove, right? Option number 2 could be a cast iron stove. And option number 3 would be a soapstone stove. Which type of material reigns supreme? Which one is the king of stoves? I'm telling you what, there's only one way to find out, and that's by doing burn tests on all 3. You heard me right. We're burning all 3. We're testing them all one-on-one, on one, one-on-one on one, all versus each other to see which one is the best. Let's go. Don't forget, if you're in the Denver, Colorado area, come to our showroom today. And if you're shopping for a wood stove, call us. Even if you're not in the local area, a lot of times we can still help you out. We'd sure love a shot at the business. Make sure you subscribe, do all the things. All right, before we get into the burn tests, I thought I would just go over a few pros and cons of the different models. So, what's the advantages of steel stoves? Well, steel stoves in general are a little more contemporary. So if that's the look you prefer, that's a good way to go. They also are a little more affordable. So steel stoves are usually the most affordable stoves. So if you're on a budget, steel is a great way to shop. Now, from a performance standpoint, steel stoves usually have fully welded, seamless boxes. So as they age, they don't have seams. So they stay airtight for longer periods of time versus a soapstone or a cast iron stove. Conversely, the cons to them are, because they're steel, if they are overfired, they could potentially warp. But again, you shouldn't be overfiring any of these stoves. So that's a little bit of a con. Now, we'll wait to get into the burn test to talk about this. But in general, we're gonna see if it proves true. But steel stoves heat up the fastest, but the flip side of that is they cool down the fastest. So the quick hot fire, quick dead fire, if that makes sense. They get heat out into the room faster though. So if you need it to spread across your house in a very quick period of time, that's an advantage of steel. All right, let's get to cast iron. Cast iron, one, just has this classic tried and true look. They do come in more of a contemporary style if you wanted them to, but in general, cast iron just gives you that true, classic wood stove feel. So that's a huge advantage aesthetically. And then you can get in all the pretty porcelain finishes and things like that people love with cast iron. Now, from a performance standpoint, cast iron is known for retaining heat. So it's gonna get hotter than steel, but it doesn't necessarily push it out into the room as fast because it's building heat, but it gets hotter than steel typically, okay? The downside is a true cast iron stove is mortared together. So we'll have like a left side, a right side, a front side, a top, and a back. So you essentially have more seams. So 15, 20 years down the road, you could have not warping, but you could have those seams kind of break loose. You have to remortar them. Very rare, but that could happen, if you move it around a lot, which who's moving around a wood stove. But it is more durable. So the advantage is it's gonna hold heat for longer. It's gonna get hotter, but you could have a little bit of leakage. So probably shouldn't say the word leakage, but anyways, what's the advantage to soapstone? Soapstone retains heat even more than cast iron, in theory. We're gonna put this to the test to see if it's actually true. So it's actually gonna retain the most amount of heat, but again, even more than cast iron, that heat's gonna just stay in by the stove and sort of slowly radiate out. So it's not like you have, make your eyes water heat in your face all the time. But it should stay the hottest for the longest. Now, similar to cast iron, it has a lot of similarities where it's mortared in, so it definitely has more seams than a steel stove. You know what, there's not really a lot of disadvantages to soapstone though. I mean, I can't really think of anything outside of more seams. It's very durable, especially like the Hearthstone models, that soapstone's like this thick, so it's extremely durable. Well, now we better get to the test. Let's see which one reigns supreme. Okay, so today we're testing the Hearthstone Heritage. Now we're gonna see a couple things. One, we're gonna test out the soapstone material. I wanna see what's gonna do better, soapstone, cast iron, or steel. But the thing is it's not gonna be quite apples to apples because catalytic converters are designed different, stoves are a little bit different sizes, but it'll give us a good idea in general which ones are gonna give us the longest burn time. I'm curious to see that if our best-selling stove is gonna be the longest burning. So we're gonna check out these Boom fire starters. Look how cool that looks. So these are all natural, like kind of mossy substance, but let's see how good they do. Kaboom, baby, like PXG. All right, so there's a bunch of different techniques. A lot of people will do like a, log cabin style. So the way I like to do it is because we have hardwood, I didn't have any softwood to get this fire started. Obviously, like a pine or something's really easy, soft, and ignites really quick. But because we have like a hard oak in here right now, what I like to do is just start it. And then I like to not shut the door all the way, but I also don't like to leave it open all the way. Now it's easy to just leave it open all the way because you get a lot more oxygen into the firebox. But the problem with that is with this door wide open, I feel like you don't get, that box is not retaining any heat at all. So I like to keep this closed a little bit just so it can really start to heat up the firebox. Now a way you can kind of cheat that is get yourself a good old-fashioned bellow, and then you can pump air into it the old-fashioned way. So how do you know when the stove is ready to have the door shut and to choke down the air? Here's a little test. One, you can hear the draft, but a way you can visualize it is shut this door, but don't latch it, and watch. Look at that thing. Look at that mama just trying to suck it shut. So now that signals to me that we can fill this bad boy to the brim and choke her down. All right, this is how you know when your stove is running efficiently. See this? It's almost like fire above the log. That's all the smoke and soot reburning. So that's that efficiency reburn sort of starting to kick in, and is literally just burning smoke and soot in the middle of the air. It almost looks like a ghost flame is what we call it. Little industry term for you, but that's when you know you have an efficient stove. Okay, so I have this ripping for about a half hour. I engaged the catalytic combustor, which you can see is definitely working. Look at all that reburn that we have going on. I still have the oxygen wide open, and you can see the oxygen blowing in. I mean, that's just, what I'm trying to do is get a ripping hot coal bed, which is what we're doing. Now, I think if we were to do this like super accurately, trying to simulate going to bed, this would be running all day long. You'd have just a raging hot coal bed. You could fill the whole thing up with wood and then choke this down all the way. But because I started this with a cold start, I can't choke the oxygen down all the way, or what's gonna happen is my logs will eventually burn out because it's not hot enough to have that little amount of oxygen. We basically gotta give it a little bit of oxygen. But to really simulate that, we'd have to run it all day. It's in the middle of summer, then start it, and then I'd have to get here at like 4 in the morning because we leave at 5. So we can't realistically simulate that. So what you're gonna do is do this apples to apples with each stove and have them running about halfway close, not all the way. And then just see where we're at the end of the workday. But nothing to do now except check on this in a few hours. All right, so we're about 4 hours in. I just kind of stoked the coals and lumped them all together. See, here's the thing is what people don't think about or realize is that long after your actual flames are gone, if you have a good stove, it's gonna heat for hours and hours. So check this out. This soapstone on the top is at 230, 220. Sides are at 280. Glass is about 220. Right side, 320. So it's still radiating 300 degrees in some spots into the room. So it's gonna continue to heat your house for quite a while. And I have it open. So at the 4 hour mark, we still have fire, and I didn't run this as slow as possible because what I said earlier, we didn't have the optimum circumstances to do like a full overnight burn, but I've never refilled it, and we still got a huge pile of coals that we can stoke a few more times. We'll check on it in a couple more hours. Okay, so we're just shy of 6 hours. Now remember, this is like wide open. So if in a real home setting, if I was able to choke this down all night, it would be even longer. So we're going on 6 hours. Now here's what's so cool about Soapstone and this catalytic combustor that's in here. How long's it been since we haven't had a flame, Chris? Probably 3 hours?
Yeah.
At least 3 hours with no flame. But check this out. The top of this Soapstone putting off almost 200 degrees. So it's still radiating heat. Side of the stove, 250. This side of the stove, 270. And the glass is harder to read because it likes to read. Got to hit the glass just right. Glass is almost 300. So the point is even though there's no flame, we have still a red hot coal bed and it's pumping heat into the room. Now for fun, I looked at the Hearthstone brochure and they have this little chart from 200 to 400 degrees. We're in hour 6, we're about right here, about 300 degrees. Now that's spot on. So right now we're dead on with this chart and we're wide open. So I think if we were able to choke that down, it'd be even better. But check this out. So they're saying anything above 200 is going to heat a house. So above the 14-hour mark, we're still technically heating the house. So what I'm getting at is you can let this go all night long. I would say that you're going to have hot coal bed. It's 5 o'clock and we got to get rolling. Otherwise, we'd test this in a couple hours. But in 2 hours, you'll be able to start a fire no problem. Now, here's what I mean by that. Check this out. Oh, it's timing out. Yeah, so it's over 800 degrees on the inside. Now this is solid. This is a big old log that's hardwood. Let's see what I can do here. See if I can work my magic a little bit. Let's see if I can get this thing to spontaneous combust. How long that's gonna take. You kidding me? That's 6 hours later. No matches needed. Hearthstone does a pretty good job. So I put one extra log in. So that's going to be our test for the future. I'm going to let this open up just so it can really rip for a minute till that log catches. That's going to be our test. And then we'll test it in the morning, which is going to be, so what we got? We got about 5, 6, 7. We got about 16 hours till morning. So I'm pretty sure it'll be all the way out. I don't think we'll be able to start a fire fresh in the morning. But look at that thing. No matches needed. All you need is a good bellow. Now in 2 hours from now, with how easily that lit, you'll have no problem in, let's say, 2 hours to be 8 hours. So if you went to bed for 8 hours with a hot coal bed on low, honestly, it's probably about what this is because we'd be able to choke that flame down even better in a real life situation. So that's what you would do in the morning. So can this get overnight burns? 100%. And I think where the Soapstone is going to come out ahead from its competitors is the physical stove is going to be emitting heat into the room for longer periods of time because this Soapstone retains heat better than cast iron and better than steel. So even when our coal bed is 100% out, this stove top is still going to be hot and still going to be putting heat into the room. That's pretty stinking cool. All right, we better get on to cast iron. All right, guys, now it's time for the Vermont Castings Encore unit, about the same size as the Heritage. Has its work cut out for us. When we came back in the morning, the sides of the Hearthstone Soapstone was shooting 86 degrees. So, and then that was at 11 o'clock. So a full 24-hour cycle, we were still above room temperature off of the stove, and we still had a warm coal bed. So we'll see what the Encore can do. All right, so it's about 3 o'clock. So it's been running for about 4 hours. So similar to the Heritage, our flame the Hearthstone, our flame has gone out, but it's still radiating a ton of heat off of the stove. just my gut, you know, it's 350 degrees. It's the heat coming off it. It feels a little more intense than the Hearthstone. And I think the reason is that Soapstone sort of internalizes that heat and then sort of trickles out for a longer period of time. So my guess is this stove's gonna cool down faster, but it's emitting a little more heat out into the space. Like I can feel it a little bit further away, if that makes sense. So let's check out our ember bed. So you can still see we got a ripping hot coal bed. I mean, it's looking pretty good. So my guess is it's 3 o'clock now. When we leave here at 5, it's still gonna be putting off a ton of heat. So again, these stoves are just so efficient. They just keep heating and heating even without a flame. Okay, so it's going on, it is 6 hours. Over 6 hours since we've been running this. The tops and sides, the cast iron is retaining heat. It's sitting over 200 degrees. And you know, I can feel the radiant heat off of it, can't you, Chris?
Yeah.
And let's just see how our ember bed's doing. See if we kind of scoop these coals together. I mean, we got hot coals there. Let's try throwing a little bellow on it and see if we can get a little flame out of this 6.5 hours later. Oh yeah, 6.5 hours later, we could throw a log on that. I'm gonna have a hot fire. All right, now it's time to test the steel stove. We had some fun with some soapstone. We had some fun with some cast iron, cooked a steak on it. And now it's time to load up a steel stove and see how she does today. So same thing, this is a catalytic stove. All 3 stoves we're testing use a catalytic combustor. So we should be fairly apples to apples. So I don't have it engaged right now. What I like about MF Fire is they give you a stovetop thermometer right on the stove, so there's no guessing. So right now we have it open, and then it tells us when to engage the catalytic combustor. And then you'll see in this video, it has a really, really pretty flame. The way it hits that 45-degree angle ceiling, sort of rolls on this big tall glass, more of a contemporary type wood stove. But it's one of my favorites, so in a steel stove. Kind of anxious to see how it performs today. All right, it's time to engage the cat and fill this bat. Ooh, it definitely got hot. Okay, let's engage this cat. All right, we're about 3 or 4 hours in to the burn. I want to just, you can see we have a really hot ember bed. But I tell you what I don't like about this stove is it's small. There's no ash lip or anything, so it can be a little dangerous if you're not careful. You gotta definitely know what you're doing. You can't just get in there. See, look at that. Don't touch those. I think we got concrete floors in here. It's over 300. So that catalytic combustor is working. We'll check on it at the end of the day. Okay, so side of the stove, it's the end of the day. We're still sitting at 270. It's doing pretty good for a tiny little stove. This catalytic combustor in this stove is really doing a good job. We still have radiant heat coming off this thing, but just eyeballing it and watching it throughout the day compared to the other two, I know it's gonna be the coldest in the morning, if that makes sense. So that's what I think. So now I'm gonna give you my conclusion on what I think between all of these stoves. Let's get to that. Okay, so that's our test. Here's my conclusion after doing the test. The Soapstone was the hottest in the morning, which was about 16 hours later. The Vermont Castings was room temperature, and the steel, same thing, about room temperature. But I will say this, the steel stove got the hottest the fastest, and you could feel the heat further away quicker with the steel. Same thing with the cast iron. You can feel it quicker. And so our theory proved true. The Soapstone took longer to get out into the space, but in the morning was still the hottest. In the morning, 16 hours later, we're still at almost 90 degrees. So it retained heat the longest. That is true. So I think if your primary goal is to keep heat the longest without refilling it, you need to buy a Soapstone stove. All that being said, anything that's EPA certified that qualifies for the tax credit is exceptional with efficiency, like absolutely exceptional. So steel, cast iron, Hearthstone, or Soapstone I should say, if you're buying a good quality stove, I don't care what it's made out of, if they qualify for the tax credit and you know how to operate it, you are, but you aren't kind of splitting hairs, if that makes sense. So don't deep dive into that too much. I say that with a caveat because selling stoves for 15 years, wood stove people love deep diving. They love data, they love statistics. It's just what you guys do. You guys are hands-on, you load and split your own wood. You want to know all the details, you want all the data. That's typically the pattern I see with wood stove shoppers. So there's the data for you. Hopefully that helps you. If burn time is what you're after more than anything, you need to buy a Hearthstone Heritage. It's the only stove to buy, if that's what you're after. Now, if you're after ease of use and convenience, you probably saw with the Vermont castings, it's a little easier to load. If you want to get into other details besides actual burn time, go to this link and watch our top 5 wood stove videos. We'll see you guys next time.